Right. Well, I am so happy today to have Jena Jauchius with me. And I've been involved with her and following what she does with her nature play. I feel it's very important to get our kids out there and connecting with nature, but she really ensures that develop, developing like landscape and play spaces that are directly meant for getting those kids connecting with nature and using all their senses and all that's involved. And what she calls N is for nature play. So Jena, welcome.
Thank you, Patrice. I'm so happy to be here, having a conversation with you today.
So tell us more. So what brought you
Yeah.
into like developing this program and really focusing in on getting our kids playing in nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a landscape architect, and for 25 years now, I've been specializing in creating sensory-based, nature-filled play and learning spaces for my jam is the little guys, but it's really for like 0 to 18 kids. Um, My work is all sensory based, and it's all about creating environments that really support children's individual nervous systems. For about 22 of those 25 years, I've been focusing on creating supportive places for children with neurodiversity, children with autism, sensory processing disorders, ADHD. And what I've found through that work is that when we create a place that supports the sensitivities of children with neurodiversities, it supports all of us. And so it makes it so much more of a beautiful, inclusive place to play and learn. And so the spaces that I help people create are nature play areas, sensory gardens, outdoor classrooms, green schoolyards. And so I work from people's backyards to public schools to early childhood centers and everything in between. And it's so much fun. So that's the design work I do, but I also do education. So I teach people about children's 8 physical sensory systems. There's not just 5, there's a lot more than that. And then I teach people also how to look at their child's play space or their learning space, their outdoor classroom from a sensory perspective so that we become more in tune with how children and their nervous systems are interacting with the sensory qualities of their environments because we want them to thrive. And sometimes there are aspects about children's spaces that might trigger their sensory systems and put them into survival mode, and that kids can't learn or they can't grow, they can't socialize and connect when their nervous systems are in survival mode. And so I teach parents and teachers and educators all about that too. So it's so much fun.
Well, you mentioned here there's 8 sensory
Yes.
there. Can you
Sure. So there's the 5 classic senses that we all know and love. We're very familiar with sight, touch, taste, smell, and sound. And then there are 2 movement-based systems, which the first one is our vestibular system. It's located in our inner ear, and it has to do with where our heads are at relative to the gravitational pull. So are we upside down or are we right side up? That's really important, right, for us to be able to move around and do things. And so swinging and spinning and rolling and crawling and running and walking are all balancing on a balance beam are all vestibular activities that feed that really important movement-based system. And interestingly, for those interested in like sensory processing, all of our other sensory information travels through the parts of our brain that process the vestibular system first, and then they get processed in the specific parts of the brain that process. It's really important. So think about like if a child is swinging, it's the sight. They're watching something. They're keeping their eyes tracked on a single thing while their body is moving in space. So it really talks about, like it really speaks to the importance of multisensory activities, brain development, creating the whole child. And so the next one is the proprioceptive system or proprioception, which is our body awareness system. And so it has to do actually with a couple of things. where our bodies are at in space relative to the things around us, so we can move through spaces and get to where we need to be and do all the things we need to do. It also has to do with our body's knowledge of the use of force to do an activity. So like if I had a paper cup of water sitting in front of me, it's my proprioceptive system. So my brain communicates to my tendons and joints and muscles and all the way down to my fingertips, the pressure that I need to pick up that paper cup of water and take a drink without squishing it or without gripping it so loosely that it slides through my fingers. And so proprioceptive, it has to do with everything that we do, like balancing and climbing and big body movements, but it also has to do with really fine-tuned movements like gardening, using tools, tying our shoelaces, writing with a pencil, speaking, because our tongue is a proprioceptive muscle. Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool. Every time I talk about this, I just love this so much. And then the last one is interoception. And this is the sense I'm actually still learning quite a bit about because there's so much to it. Interoception has to do with it's our fully internal. It has to do with our internal awareness of pain and hunger and all these internal body sensations. But it also has to do with our ability to read those body sensations and turn those into emotions. So it's really like our emotions are centered in our interoceptive sensory system. And there's so much to it. There's so much to it that I'm still like, that's the one I'm really like trying to understand more. But it really answers the question, how do I feel?
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about kids, that they don't have the words for it yet. They know they're reading their body sensations in the moment. And sometimes their body sensations lead them to laugh and giggle and, interact. But sometimes their body sensations tell them to back off. It tells them maybe this is time for a meltdown. I'm uncomfortable. That's their interoceptive system. But all of these systems cannot be looked at individually. They have to be looked at as a whole because they function as a whole.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That's why I follow your work and find it so interesting and
Yeah.
And that you're incorporating that. So now let's take it to the next step, how you incorporate that and keeping it as you're addressing the whole system and bringing it into creating like play areas.
Yeah. So if you think about it, we are always immersed in our environment. We cannot escape it. This is where we live. And our environments are constantly talking to our nervous system and through our sensory systems. There's no way to turn our sensory systems off. If you've ever tried to stop hearing, you can do this, but you still kind of hear. If you stop moving, you're still sensing your environments. You cannot turn your sensory systems off. They're not designed to be. So they're designed to constantly tell us what's going on around us and with us. And so that's a really important thing to remember. It's so obvious. We often we don't clue into that. And so it's really important for anyone who works with kids to understand the environment. Anyone's environment is probably their single most influential thing to their nervous system, right? Because it's always communicating through, if we're outdoor gardening, taking a walk, nature is communicating to our nervous system through all of its natural qualities. And so when we create an outdoor play space or a learning landscape or a garden, edible garden, it's really important to think about the multisensory qualities of it and how we can really support a child's unique nervous system in that space. And so that's why I love what you do, Patrice. You understand this already, the importance of nature for us as a whole being. And so nature, I always say nature has the most perfect sensory stimulation we can find. We can't replicate it as human, created things, indoor spaces. We can't replicate that perfection because our bodies have evolved and are designed to have that perfect communication with nature, right? And so there are ways that you can look at your child's outdoor space and tailor it to their if they have sensitivities, if they have, sensory processing challenges, or if your child is developing, quote unquote, typically, they still have sensory experiences that they prefer. And it could be a personal preference, or it could be where they're at developmentally. So their brain is always growing and always reaching for more. Brain's part of the nervous system. And so you can really create and tailor a sensory garden, a little nook in your backyard that really supports your child based on your child's unique nervous system.
Yeah. And even like this is developing these play areas, but I always like if you get a chance to actually take your kids, I live in the forest, so take them out in the forest. And that's my big thing, bringing the kids, to the forest. And it's quite interesting because the kids today, they're so used to being on their devices. And I know, like, even for myself, I'll work on the screen and then I've got to go out. And like literally I walk out and I'm into the forest, out my door. And I've got to shake my head. Like
Yeah.
it's a totally different space. And
Yeah.
and like I say, like it can involve all your senses and like I'll go out and I'll go for a walk, but just you stop, you listen, you look, you feeling, you're breathing in the fresh air, you're walking and moving, you've got to walk over twigs and whatever it is. But if you get that opportunity, take your kids
Yeah.
for nature walks and let them bring back a little bit of nature too to put in their
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. You touched on a really important topic, screen time. And I gave a presentation earlier this year or in 2024 to a large group of educators and talked about screen time. There's a lot of statistics on it right now, and there needs to be more studies on it. But what we are finding is I have a couple of statistics I jotted down because I thought we might touch on this subject. So if you just Google average screen time statistics for like the age of your child, that you'll find some interesting eye-opening things. And so I'll share some average numbers. So children, which is like 0 to 18, so average for that whole age range. So let's talk about the comparison with how much time the average child spends on a screen per day versus the time they spend in outdoor unstructured play each day. I had to write this down because I have to get these numbers right. So on average, and so when I give the average numbers, it's going to be greater for the older kids and less time for the younger kids. And so on average per day, a child spends around 6 hours a day on a screen. 6 hours a day. You calculate that out over a week. That's 42 hours. It's like these things called full-time jobs, right?
Yeah.
And then if we look at that over a year, that is 3 months of solid time, 24 hours a day. That's like just slightly less than sleeping, right? Just slightly less than sleeping.
Well,
so 3 months.
Mind that, yeah, that's 6 hours a day, but how many hours are they sleeping? They're not.
Yeah, yeah,
of their
exactly.
6 hours of their active time. Oh,
yeah.
And you've got
and so
outdoor play too?
Yeah. So if we look at outdoor unstructured, like free play, just outside, playing as they see fit, using their imagination. For the older kids, it might just be, hanging out, talking with friends or whatever. The average is 4 to 7 minutes a day. So on the high side, let's go 7 minutes. I know, my face does that.
Whoa.
So over the week, it's 49 minutes. It's not even a full hour. I mean, come on.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so let's calculate that out over a year. It's 42 hours. And 42 hours is a number I already said. 42 hours a week on screens, 42 hours a year in outdoor unstructured play. And so my whole point is that our nervous systems, which I say is our single most important thing in our lives because it is the mechanism through which we understand our world and ourselves, it's not designed to spend that much time on a screen, which is not real experience. It has very little positive sensory stimulation. It actually is more akin to sensory junk food.
Yeah.
And our bodies are left, our children and ourselves, our bodies and our nervous systems are left feeling very unsatisfied. They aren't doing their jobs because we're not giving them real experiences. And so that has implications in health and social connection and so many things over our entire life course for our kids and for ourselves.
Yeah.
Isn't that, it's nuts. Our world right now is so imbalanced. And this is why we're doing, you and I and everyone else in these circles are saying these things and really inviting parents. And I think so many parents know in their hearts and they know that there's something different out there. And the difference is we just need to go back to what we've been doing all along, and that's spending time in nature.
Yeah. And you can find it, like, even if you're in the city, you'll find little bits of wild spaces or a little pot of to grow some plants. And we talk about that, the disconnect there with the kids. They're on their devices and it's giving them their endorphin hits or whatever. It actually could become quite almost addictive, because, and I've seen incidences there where we had a gathering in the forest, and there was two kids that I'd worked with in pre-K, but they're older now, and they had come to the gathering, and I asked them, do you want to go for a little hike and let's see if we can find some cranberries or see what we can find? And the one child was just eager and like, yeah. The other one had her device in the forest and she just wanted to stay there and look at her device.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oh man, you're missing out on so much. And another time I took the kids, grade sixers, we took them for a hike in the forest, and they were just like, when are we going home? I just want to get back and, and play my games. And it wasn't until I found some like wild edibles growing. And that's the one thing that will get kids off their device is that, kids and food, they will drop their devices when they're hungry. Even though sometimes, parents will, struggle with trying to get them to come for meal times and get them off their devices, but they get hungry enough, they'll drop it.
Yeah.
But it's very sad that disconnect and like you offer making the play space, but there's other ways too that we can get that connection happening.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I really recommend, and it's so easy to do, you don't need anything for it, is take your kids on a sensory walk, and you can actually slow it down to make it very slow and intentional. And then that way you're really able, because if you're walking too fast, you don't really stop and savor, right? And our nervous system really wants to savor everything. And so if you slow it down for a slow-mo sensory walk, you pick a point A and point B, and you walk as slowly as possible with your kids, and you notice everything that you can through what you see, what you hear, what you can feel, how you need to move through that space. Maybe you need to get down and crawl. Maybe you stand up and move. So there's different ways that you can move through the space and make it fun and playful for the kids too. but make it really slow so that kids can really savor and really tune into those experiences. Because like you just said, the screen time is it is addictive. Studies have shown that it changes brain chemistry and changes brain structure so that we are always seeking that input. And so the nature also changes the brain, but it changes the way that's more fit to our original design. And so one of these walks can be done anywhere. It can be done in your backyard. It can be done outside on the sidewalk if you live in apartments, neighborhood park, wherever. And so that's something that's really fun that you can do. And it's really important. One of the things that can hold us back in really supporting our kids is our adult busy lifestyle. And so we're overwhelmed too. Like we're trying to do the jobs and cook and cook dinner and clean the house and do all of the adult things that we have to do. And by the end of the day, we're wiped out. We're exhausted. We're completely drained. If we can set our phones down too and go do these things outside, it actually replenishes us too. We will feel better. We get all the same benefits that our kids get. And so that is something that I really would like parents and teachers to remember, is that when we do these things with the kids, we get the same benefits. And you don't always have to do the same activity as the kids. I talk about, parallel play in parenting. Well, parallel play in child development is where kids can play side by side, play different things, but they're still connecting through that activity of play. It's just not direct connection. We can do the same thing outside. And so, when I talk about gardening, when I ask my kids to go out and play outside, I built a sensory garden in our yard for the kids. So they'll go out and play, but I'll go out and parallel play. I'll do some gardening, pull some weeds, plant some flowers or whatever it is. But we're still all out there together. We're still all getting what we individually need. And we're still connecting. So, And we can't connect through the screens. We just can't.
No.
Yeah.
No. It's only involving certain senses, like the sight, hearing, like it's even lacking the sense of smell, and definitely no movement or very restricted movement. So
and even the sensory experiences that screens provide, say through gaming and that sort of thing, it's designed to keep a kid on for as long as possible. There's a really interesting book that was written called Hello Kids, and it talks about screen addiction for all the age ranges, and it's really eye-opening. So if you have kids who really, really want to spend time on screens and you're needing some more reasons why and how to get them off, go read Glow Kids or listen to it on Audible. It's a good one.
Yeah. And another good book was that Last Child in the Woods with Robert Love. And that one too, like even our society, it's taken away those green spaces and the almost like a fear in the parents that to let your kids go out and explore in the wilderness and it's it's what you call the helicopter parenting or whatever, but and if that is something for you, you have a fear, like, okay, so let's you can start a garden right in your backyard, the safety of your backyard. Lots going on in the gardens for the kids to explore, and they get to be a part of that growing process and really get that up close connection to nature. It's
and as you mentioned, you don't need a backyard to do this. You can, if you have a balcony, you can have some potted plants on the balcony. You can create a little fort out on the balcony for the kids. You can do it inside the house too. So it doesn't, and open the windows, have some fresh air, have some sunlight. So if you don't feel restricted, if you don't have an outdoor space, you can still be creative and make a little nook here and there in your living space for kids to play and be imaginative and still connect with the nature that is around them still.
Yeah. Because we are a part
Absolutely.
We kind of forget that sometimes with the disconnect. So it's bringing us
Yeah.
back, get us out of cyberspace, bring us back to the natural world, and
Yeah.
let us flourish. Really,
Hmm.
it's like we often forget that, you have aspirations for certain things, but it's bringing up the whole child, like addressing every part of them. And I found it really interesting when you're talking about that one system that is actually that's what regulates like the emotions or where the emotions come from.
Hmm.
And that was another thing that the kids with like this age of information, they're getting all this information and knowledge and all this, and you know they kind of seem to be having a hard time even recognizing their emotions because it was more like
Hmm.
the intellect or the that uh that part of them that was being fed and not nurtured.
Yeah. Yes. So much of building our emotional health and our uh, well, our emotional being is through connection. And so when screens seek to individualize and separate us, nature and collaborative activities really seeks to reconnect us. And so kids have to have nature in whatever way and social connection and all of those beautiful things that come from both of just those two things. That's how kids build their social emotional uh, well-being and capabilities, their skills. And they have to have those to navigate through life. Otherwise, this is a really disjointed experience for them. And they're not being able to experience and live out a lot of the beauty that comes from being in connection in through connection with nature, connection with others, and connection with self. And they'll actually, in my opinion, they'll never truly understand themselves unless they build that emotional piece.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, you can
and
learn.
yeah, it looks different for everyone too. It looks different for everyone, and so uh, if you can realize that the child in front of you is a unique individual being on the planet with their unique nervous system, their unique perspectives and ways of being, the way they express themselves as a human being, I think that we would have a lot greater appreciation for one another. We all don't want to experience and learn the same ways. We all don't want the same vision for our own lives and that sort of thing. And that really starts in childhood. And so
Yeah,
if parents can really support that individual child, then that child is going to grow up with confidence and be able to speak clearly for themselves and to know that and trust themselves. And so when we talk about nature and gardening and nature play and all these things, they are actually the settings that help a child be able to build that foundation that they are going to carry into adulthood. And it is absolutely essential that they have that foundation, and it cannot be gotten through screens. It cannot be gotten through technology. That can be a piece later on after they've done all the important brain development that they need to during childhood, after they've figured out how they love to connect with others, how they've figured out what they really love to do. This is all what happens in childhood. And,
yeah,
and, and then the technology piece can come in and supplement that. So yeah, I hear a lot of parents say, well, if my kids aren't on a screen, and this we're talking about like 2 years old, if my kids aren't becoming familiar with a screen, then they're going to fall behind in school. That's totally not the case. And in fact, it's opposite. The screens actually inhibit brain development that is actually gotten through play. So they need to play in an unstructured, imaginative way, actually in all the ways, but they
yeah,
need play.
Yeah.
before they can write, before that they can use screens. And so screens actually starves them of the experiences that they need to truly be the adult that they're meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You've said so much there. And I really want to stress that point of each child's uniqueness and celebrate that.
Yeah.
Really let your child know, because there's nothing worse than a child feeling like they're worthless or they're, uncared for or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
each child is very unique and special and should be celebrated. And
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
uh,
Yeah.
and
But go ahead.
and with that, okay, I've lost that. No, you go ahead there.
Oh, okay. Well, I can share a really like one of the most profound stories that I have ever heard. I love sharing this, whether I'm talking in conferences with large groups of people or in situations like podcasts. I love sharing the story I heard it's got to be maybe 8 years ago now. I heard the story. So this story was told to me by a woman who, at a previous time in her life, she was the director for a rural nature center somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember which state she said, but this rural nature center was a frequent destination for local schools' field trips, and so they'd get buses of kids all the time. And this one day, this busload of fifth graders show up, and so kids come spilling out of the bus, and the staff collects them and gets them right into their nature-based learning activities. And about 15 minutes into it, the director's walking through this group of students and staff, and she's looking for the teacher. She can't find the teacher. And so finally she sees her a little ways off in the distance, and the teacher is crying, like crying. And the director's like, oh no. And so she like hustles over to her and, is everything okay? Did something happen? Is there something I can do for you? And the teacher says, no. I'm wonderful. These are tears of joy. And so the teacher tells the director that just a few minutes before, so 10 minutes, 15 minutes into their visit, one of her students came up to her. And this is a boy, fifth grade boy, so 10, 11 years old, a fifth grade boy with nonverbal autism. And he comes up to the teacher and he says, it is so beautiful here and the air smells so good. This is a boy with nonverbal autism whose parents probably never had heard the sound of his voice.
Wow.
And so like when I heard the story as a landscape architect, specializing in sensory spaces, like my mouth dropped open and I'm like thinking to myself, what happened? And so as I have come to understand the importance of the nervous system, something about his experience was his nervous system and nature communicating with one another. Something about that natural space opened a door within him to allow his communication to flow out. And it wasn't just a word or two, it was complete sentences that clearly had been there all along. And so I just, when I talk about the importance of why children need nature, these are things that sometimes we can't even see or predict or expect. And they are so profound. And this may not happen with everybody, but actually I've heard a similar story since then. So I know it's just not a one-off story. And so do not, I would say to parents, the takeaway message is do not underestimate the value that being outside and playing outside has for your child's development and their ability to thrive as they're uniquely meant to thrive. It's going to look different for everyone. It's going to look different for each and every child, but it is so powerful in ways that we cannot even expect.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you're thinking of that, I was like, we were kind of addressing like with the plants and nature there, but animals.
Hmm.
That's a lot of the thing where you're talking about therapeutics there with, with horses, or they have emotional support dogs, or it's a way of, if maybe you can't get out and play with other kids, if you
Hmm.
at least have that connection with a pet or an animal, and
Yeah.
until you can have your play dates or whatever. I know, like
Yeah.
out in the country sometimes you might not be able to get, you know
Yeah. And animals still, they're one of those pieces of connection that children have such a natural ability to, sometimes it's easier to connect with animals than it is other people, you
oh
know? They're, yeah. And so that animals help build that social emotional, yeah, my kids love our chickens, and we have a couple geese and we have a whole flock of chickens, and they love spending time with them. They all have names, and um, there's an absolute connection there.
yeah,
So yeah, don't underestimate that either.
it's that whole broad spectrum that we are all a part of with
That's
nature.
right.
So take that opportunity, find those little pieces of nature space, or bring it into your home, or just realizing that you are a part, your children are a part, and celebrating their uniqueness and giving them every opportunity to grow and thrive and be all they can be.
Yeah, well said.
All right. Thank you, Jena. And look up Jena there. And people can find you, like you've got the website,
Mhm.
annisfornatureplay.com.
Correct. Yep.
Is
Uh,
the best place for folks to find you?
yeah, it is. And as for natureplay.com, I'm also on Facebook. I've got a couple places there, but just search N is for Nature Play. I'm also on Instagram. Just started a YouTube channel that has some, I host a new online summit called Sensory Kids by Nature, which seeks to really expand the conversation. Patrice, I hope to have you on. The conversation around supporting our diverse children, not just neurodiversities, but the whole of childhood, really. And so I bring experts on from, talk to a functional neurologist this last time, a functional nutritionist, educators, people in alternative education and homeschooling, so and beyond. So I bring together lots of different people, lots of different professions and ways of thinking to really expand the conversation and how we really support uh, all of our children through the sensory perspective.
All right. So folks can look up that this will be a regular thing.
Twice a year, yeah, the summit will be. But in the meantime, they can find me on my website, or Facebook is a great way.
Well, I really appreciate this, Jena, and especially after I heard those statistics. My goodness.
Yes, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, getting our kids back to nature. Thank
Hmm.
you very much, and I hope folks will look her up at nisfornatureplay.com or Facebook, Instagram, YouTube even.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice.